All right. Hello and welcome to Just Animals Podcast. I'm Elle, and with me, as always, is my dad, aka Guy.
Hello, Pod World. It's great to be back, and it's great to have Dr. Lowe, one of our top
Just Lowe.
favorite.
There's no E. It's
Just
just Lowe.
sorry, Dr. Lowe, one of our favorite guests, and I've got some great questions for you.
Oh, of course you do.
Did you? What do you call that thing? That was a shark. What did you call it? Shark. What do you call that exhibit or thing that
His
we went
shark
to?
lab. That
Oh,
is his shark lab.
oh yeah, but the event is called Sharks at the Beach.
Sharks at the
Sharks at the
beach.
beach.
Yeah,
Not to be
Yes.
because
confused
we
with.
have sharks at the beach.
Yeah. All right.
Literally.
It was great. If you're down in Long Beach, is that happen every year? Is that an annual event, or how often do you do that?
It was. That's our third annual. We didn't do them, of course, for the last 2 years because of COVID,
Right.
but
Right.
this was the third one that we've held, and that's the most people we've ever had. We had over 740 people.
Well,
Wow. That's
it was
great.
fabulous. In addition to sea animals, they had this room with
The other mammals and
other mammals, and that was very
avians.
exciting to touch. It's interactive. You can touch a lot of stuff in the exhibit. That's you know, especially my daughter. She's a toucher, but it's nice to be able to feel what an otter feels like.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that hopefully that connection makes people more anxious to protect animals.
Well, and keep in mind that those are university collections,
Yeah,
and they've been amassed over literally decades,
right.
and they're what we use to train students. So, in the past, we would have to take students to a museum, but we've made these collections. They require obviously special rooms and places to keep and preserve them.
Yeah,
But imagine training a vertebrate zoologist who actually gets to see the skull of walrus, or
Right.
to feel the fur of an otter. So those are things that in our virtual world, it becomes really hard to train scientists these days if we can't give them that
right,
experience.
right. Well, I
Right.
need to hijack this podcast for just
No,
a
no, no, no.
second,
Stop.
Bunny.
For what? For what?
I want to talk to Dr. Lowe about this. I just saw this come through on my news feed.
Well,
It's
hold
from
on.
the
Can we
LA.
let
Let
quiet
me
for
just
release
give
what?
me give me 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes because this is
Sorry,
critical.
Dr.
This
Lowe.
is no.
He,
He's going to be appreciate this question. So, Dr. Lowe, I
okay.
just found this today from the Los Angeles Times. History of DDT ocean dumping in LA worse than expected. EPA investigation finds. After an exhaustive historical investigation into the barrels of DDT waste reportedly dumped decades ago near Catalina Island, federal regulators concluded that the toxic pollution in the deep ocean could be far worse and far more sweeping than what scientists anticipated. In internal
Eek.
memos made public recently, officials from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency determined that acid waste from the nation's largest manufacturer of DDT had not been contained in hundreds of thousands of seal barrels. Most of the waste, according to the newly unearthed information, has been poured directly into the ocean from massive tank barges. This is sad,
Oh.
sad news.
Yes, I mean I've served on the Palos Verdes Superfund site science committee, and we've known about the records. What I think most people were shocked at was that what they've seen on the seafloor does not match what were in the historic records.
Right.
So we know that's been there. We've known that that's been there for decades, right? The problem is we didn't know the magnitude of that because out of sight, out of mind, right? That's why ocean dumping back in the day was the preferable way of getting rid of things like that. Nobody would ever see it. So, but now with the new technology, we do have the ability to see it. And we now recognize that it doesn't match the records. I think what most people are shocked at was that that was permittable. That was allowable back in those days.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah, I
that
mean,
part,
Catalina is not that far from the beach of LA. It's about 20 miles. Is that it?
yeah, it's about 20 miles,
Yeah,
but that's fairly deep water.
right.
So the thing that we have been noticing is that the levels of DDT in coastal waters and in the shallow parts have been slowly dissipating. So what that tells us is that there is a disconnect between that deep water environment and the shallow water environment. So we've been somewhat insulated from that, which is good. The problem is there are some animals that are capable of diving to those depths and then bringing that back up. So the question is, without trying to clean it up, would we create a bigger problem trying to clean it than we would
Yeah.
if we left it in place?
Yes.
And what would be the long term uh, consequences of leaving that in place, assuming nothing disturbed it?
That's the $1 million question, because sometimes, like asbestos, they say don't mess with it, because when you
Just
mess with
seal
it,
it up. Yeah.
you release the toxins as a. But have you been noticing in sea mammals and sharks? Do you measure DDT?
We do. We do. And
And
we've measured some of the highest levels measured in any shark in the world, even in baby white sharks.
Ooh.
What we found very interesting was that how could a baby have such high levels of DDT and PCBs? And of course, what we learned from those studies was that the moms offload their contaminants to their babies during their pregnancy, just like mammals do.
mm,
So that means a baby white shark could be born with very, very high contaminant levels, never having fed on its own in the natural environment. So our question is, what impact has that had in white sharks? Well, as you've probably seen, there's a lot of white sharks around. So the next question that we're seeing is, or trying to answer is, how can these sharks have such high levels and not show ill effects of them? So that's a question that we haven't been able to answer. Maybe sharks hold some secret on how to deal with these high contaminant levels physiologically that other vertebrates don't. So I think we have a lot to learn from them, not just about, how they can live to be over 300 years old like some species, but how do they deal with contaminants better than other animals?
so would it be your prescription right now just to not mess with that, leave it alone, or what would you recommend
Well,
if money
after
were not an
dealing
object?
Sure, after dealing with the Palos Verdes shelf on how to deal with that and the challenges of how to do that and not resuspend more of that contaminant in the water, I'm not sure there's a way to do that. How to clean that problem up without redistributing some of that in the water column. And that's assuming that money is no object.
Yeah.
So I think we need to evaluate that very carefully. Is there a way to do it? And of course, humans are brilliant. If you give us a problem, we have brilliant engineers that find solutions. But with those solutions would have to come, you can't make the problem worse than it already is.
What was very
So
disturbing to me to learn, and this company is right down there in LA, was called Montrose. You may know have heard of them.
Oh, yes.
They were making DDT 10 years after we banned it in the United States.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
being
we're
sold out of the countries.
yeah, it's legal in other countries. So
So is it internationally banned now yet?
No.
no.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh.
So question: are we in real time watching or observing a LD50 type of thing? Like, are we in real time we're going to see that? I mean, there's no guarantee.
Sure.
Hopefully, they don't die off. But is that what you're also observing for as well? Is like, what's the LD50 of these white sharks? If assuming that they, all of a sudden can't cope with the amounts of DDT in their system. I mean, hope they. I think we're all fingers crossed. Hopefully, they can. But I'm sure this is also has potential to turn into that type of study as well. Correct?
Sure. Sure. And the problem is with sick sharks, we don't know if a shark is sick because when it is sick and it dies, it sinks to the bottom. So we never
Right.
get to see them and we can't examine them to figure out why they died. So that does pose a problem. Sharks that strand, however, like we recently had a shark that stranded at Huntington Beach last week,
No kidding.
13-foot thresher shark. And we were
Whoa.
able to do the necropsy on that shark with Dr. Mark Okihiro, who is the state's fish pathologist. And his preliminary conclusions was that shark died from a massive bacterial infection.
Ooh.
So we're trying to figure out what those bacteria are, how that shark got that infection, and why it caused the shark to strand. So
Gotcha.
it's getting access to those kinds of animals and doing
Sure.
that kind of science will help us determine, was that shark's immune system weakened for example,
Right.
because it was laden with DDT or PCB.
Right.
So all those analyses have to be done.
Right.
So I feel good knowing that in California we have people like Dr. Okihiro who's doing that kind of research for the state.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One
So
other
without
fact that I didn't learn this, that I did learn today when I was reading this article or listening to it, was that Rachel Carson was a marine biologist. I did not know that. I
Yes,
mean,
yeah,
I knew about the
she really,
Silent Spring, but I didn't know the marine biology connection.
yeah. I mean, she was a phenomenal naturalist. Period. But yes, she
true.
was trained as a marine biologist, and I would consider her one of the bravest people I've ever met. Or not, I never had a chance to meet her,
Uh
but
huh.
of the people that I know in the modern era of ecology, by far one of the bravest people out there. I mean, she saw a problem and she didn't stop until people recognized that and did something about it. And if you read some of the early challenges that she faced, I mean, she just never quit. She just kept going to Congress and kept reaching out to legislators saying, "There's a problem. There's a problem. There's a problem." So, we need more people like her.
All right. So here's a corollary to that. Maybe we need a new Rachel Carson, and I think you might know this person. But while we were at your shark lab, I was talking to one of your associates and talking about sunscreen and its impact on coral,
Mhm.
the reefs. And I said, well, can't we get the United States at least to come out and say you can't use whatever it is? There's oxybenzone. I don't know which chemicals, but
It's quite a few, isn't
can't
it?
yeah, can't we get them to say, hey, just like we stopped DDT, or is the sunscreen lobby so strong that we're never going to get this done? I mean, if it's documentable that we're destroying the reefs and impacting the oceans, I mean, there are substitutes. We don't have to invent something else. I think zinc oxide may be reef safe. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like an easy fix that just needs sunscreens need to be reformulated with known ingredients that don't have adverse impact on the coral.
Sure. So there's a recent study that came out that showed that some of that isn't true, and that it may
Really?
actually be over exaggerated the actual
Oh,
impact. And it's a good scientific study, and it brings about the point of the need for additional work, right? So, one group does a study and they come to a conclusion, and what makes science great is that it should be challenged. People should
hmm
come in and say, okay, convince me. You've really got to convince me that what you're seeing is real. So it was additional studies that have come back and shown that, well, maybe some of those chemicals aren't the problem. Maybe there are some other things that are going on. So, and they're not being funded by the sunblock companies. These are independent scientists that are doing work to do what we should be doing, and that is asking, is what we're seeing real? So, just like the DDT phenomenon, right? So we've got a big DDT problem, and we know that those chemicals, we call them legacy contaminants because even though they've been banned in this country, they hang around and they don't deteriorate very quickly, and they gather in animals, and they can have a prolonged problem. So, but it's not like we haven't done anything about that. We banned the use and the manufacturing of that in the United States. It's no longer distributed, but we also have cleanup issues to deal with. So you bring about a really good point. And the point is somebody has to recognize a problem. That's usually scientists that do that. And then somebody has to say, we need to do something about the problem. And that almost always requires some regulation. That requires somebody to come in and say, okay, we can't do it this much, or we've got to find another solution. And we're going to reduce the rate at which we do it, right? Okay, so that requires usually regulation or legislation. But after that is the most important step, in my opinion, and that's innovation. We need to innovate. We need to find a solution to the problem. And maybe that's getting rid of the problem, maybe that's mitigating the problem, or maybe that's finding another solution so that we don't go down the same track. So this path, this process of identifying a problem, regulating and innovating, we see again and again through human history, because humans have had a great knack of screwing up our environments
True.
and
Yes,
then
we are pros at that.
trying to fix it. And sometimes our fixes actually create new problems.
Right.
So we have learned, in a certain sense, to not repeat history, but yet we still do it. Nonetheless, I would argue that it's that innovation that has enabled us as a species, as a population, to grow, because our ability to innovate and solve many of our problems that were literally killing us.
Beautiful.
True. All right.
Okay. So
Well, we
you're
appreciate
done.
the
You're cut
science.
off. You're
No,
cut off.
I know, no, but he
You're cut off
addressed.
now.
I hope that you think that those were intelligent, important questions to ask.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Okay, you're
good.
cut off now. Yes.
All
So
right.
he got a brief introduction, but yes, back with us again, friend of the show, Dr. Christopher Lowe, back with us. We're so excited. Thank you again for coming back. He was
Yes, thank
he
you.
still is the shark expert. We had
Yes.
the great opportunity to actually visit the Shark Lab last weekend and finally meet Dr. Lowe in person. It was a phenomenal experience. Again, if you're ever visiting Cal State Long Beach, definitely go say hi, check out the Shark Lab, all
Yep.
their studies. They have some great specimens on display as well. But today, a different type of cartilaginous fish. I hope they are cartilaginous, right? Okay.
Yes.
We're actually going to be talking about rays, specifically stingrays. And going into that, there's freshwater and marine, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So do you study both, or is there a particular species that you study?
Well, so we study the local stingrays, which are all marine, and the freshwater stingrays are primarily found in the Amazon. So
Oh,
there are a few what we call brackish water rays. They're species that can live in not complete freshwater, not complete seawater. They can move back and forth between the two. Whereas the pure freshwater rays, like in the Amazon, are pure freshwater. They do not go back to salt water. So they're an interesting group because they tell us a lot about how sharks and rays as a group learn to tolerate salt water or
Right.
move to freshwater, and how they physiologically do that.
Right. Wow.
so that's an interesting question that you just brought up because, okay, the gills is the area where they pass the water over it and it gets the oxygen out of the water, correct? All right. So obviously, in the salt water, there's salt that
Yep.
I'm not sure how it affects their physiology, but is there a different type of gills, or what have you noticed, or how does it work?
Same type of gills
Yeah.
as the bony fish, right? So in
Uh-huh.
terms of how they work, the
Yeah.
tissues, what makes sharks different is that marine sharks and marine rays can keep their blood salinity slightly higher than that of seawater. And the
Higher than
way
seawater.
higher than seawater, that's right.
That's pretty salty.
Yes. So slightly higher. And the way they do that is they retain urea.
Oh,
So
Ah, okay.
urea, ammonia, urea,
yeah.
those are all chemicals that are the result of the breakdown of proteins, right? So that is an end product. Now ammonia is toxic to animals. Fish excrete ammonium through their gills because it's toxic. What sharks do is do a little bit more biochemistry, convert that to urea and retain it in their blood.
They don't
And
get
by
gout.
doing, they don't get gout.
That's another thing we should probably look at. How do they have such high urea and not having gout?
They get goiters, but they don't get gout.
Oh,
Okay.
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 Yeah. So the
Wow.
goiters are caused by iodine deficiencies, right? Just like
Right.
they are in people. But
Interesting.
by retaining urea, they can keep their blood almost as salty as seawater, which means their cost of regulating their salt water balance is much cheaper than it is for a saltwater fish. So that's an
Interesting.
That's
advantage that they
fascinating.
have. But urea can be toxic too. So they
Right.
also have another compound that they retain that prevents urea from denaturing DNA. So that's called TMAO. So they have a cocktail, if you will, that helps them keep their blood salty, and that enables them to keep their costs down while living in the marine environment.
Wow.
Hmm.
So our local stingrays, how big are they roughly?
Well, bat rays can get, they can weigh over 80 to 100 pounds. So
Oh
they can
wow.
get to be a wingspan of over 5 or 6 feet long.
Oh
Yeah, they can
wow.
get pretty big.
That is
Do
pretty
all rays
big.
have a poisonous tail or stinger, or some of them
So
don't?
some of them don't. So there are the true stingrays. They're the ones with a modified scale that
Yeah.
forms the spine.
Oh,
And
it's a
that
modified.
spine is just literally a modified scale.
No
Our
kidding.
round stingrays, which are local species, think of them like pancakes on the bottom, right?
Yes,
So
they
we
do look
call them
like pancakes.
pancake rays. They produce a new spine every year that grows underneath the old one. And then
Wow.
every June or July, the old one falls off and a new one is in place.
Hmm.
No
So
kidding.
it has no nerves. It acts like a big giant scale. It's like a tooth. It has dentine on it. And the part that makes it venomous is the mucus layer that's secreted over top of that. So
Oh,
in
Oh,
that
okay.
mucus layer, there is a venom. So when they jab that thing into your foot, that has grooves in the bottom that quickly channel that venom into the wound and creates that very painful ache.
wow. Are stingrays older than sharks?
No, no. So it depends on the group, but
Uh huh.
stingrays are not necessarily older than the oldest of the chondrichthyans. So the oldest of the chondrichthyans are really shark type species.
So is that
Hmm.
more like
Rays are
skates
relatively
then?
new. Say again?
So are that more like skates kind of fish then,
Yep.
instead of
So they're
actual
also
sharks? Okay.
relatively new compared
Oh,
to the
okay.
more ancestral forms, which were sharks.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So back to the stingray. So our little stingray that we have, well, I don't know if he's not like that little. Our round rays, I mean, you can just go out to Granada Beach and, come across one.
Yes.
Has that ever happened to you? I'm sure. So as regards to your studies, it's probably pretty easy to get specimens, round ray specimens in this area.
Yeah, because of their abundance. They are by far the most abundant fish by mass that you will find at any Southern California beach.
No kidding.
So they account for a bulk of the total biomass of fish at our beaches.
Oh,
And
wow.
and part of it, and you got to remember the species that we're talking about, this is the northern part of their range. They range all the way from Southern California to Panama.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they're at the northern end of their range, and their populations, we believe, have been growing over the last 50 years
Good.
because we got rid of all their predators.
Oh,
So
Oh,
seals, sea lions, giant sea bass, big sharks. We culled all those things out of our coastal waters, and that's allowed our stingray population to come back. In addition, in places like Baja, where they occur also in high numbers, you typically find them in shallow lagoons, especially in the spring when they mate. In
okay.
Southern California, we got rid of most of our lagoons. We've turned them into marinas. So
Right.
therefore, they use our open beaches for that purpose, and that's
Oh,
where people encounter them.
right. Yikes. So I
you
didn't know
know what?
seals eat them. I mean, so the stinger doesn't create a problem when they're eating, or do they know how to just not eat the stinger?
Yeah, so if you've ever watched a seal eat a shark or stingray, what they do is it's kind of like watching a dog play with a rag doll. So they grab them and they shake them and flap them back and forth until they tear them open. And then they usually only eat the livers.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah,
Oh,
pate. They're into
oh,
pate.
pate.
We
Okay,
heard this
Um,
okay.
from another animal that remember what was that? The orca?
yeah,
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 they like the
so
tongues.
orcas,
They
yeah,
the
like the
tongue and
tongues.
the
tons of the whales, yes. So,
right.
but the reason why they eat livers is that's where all the good stuff is. That's where all the oil and fat is. That's the most
Okay.
nutrient rich part of the body.
Ah, okay. Okay. And do sharks just swallow them whole or kind of chew them, or do they
Yeah,
do this?
yeah,
Okay.
same deal. They'll bite them into pieces. Bat rays, they'll chew off pieces of the wing and things like that. So yeah,
So,
white
so
Not the word.
sharks just slurp them down like pancakes.
Right.
hmm.
We do find sharks with lots of stingray spines embedded in their jaws and their gums
Oh,
and
no
their
kidding.
stomachs and their livers. So it's like trying to eat pine needles.
Wow.
I'd imagine.
No thanks.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty wild. And I mean, when that's happening, you're like, oh, this is a weird shaped tooth. Oh no, it's a stingray barb, not a tooth. Wow. So is that? Do they use the stinger for anything besides protection, or is it just for? Do they use it to feed, or is it just it's just there?
Nope, it's used primarily for protection from predators. But a colleague of mine did a really cool study looking at round stingray mating, and he found that at the end of mating season, round stingray females will form these big giant piles where they'll pile up on each other. And when males come and try to mate with the females all gang up and they spine the males.
Ouch.
So the females
Ouch.
basically say mating season is
We're done.
over.
Right, we're
Yeah,
done. We're done.
exactly.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay.
So they will use it on each other, usually females on males.
Wow, stingray on stingray crime. Who would have thought? So, what do they eat then? Since they're bottom dwellers mostly, do I have that correct? So are they just eating like little detritus or whatever, or little bottom things?
So they eat crabs, they'll eat amphipods, they'll
Okay.
eat. So down at the beach, you'll see all those little clamshells. They're called
Yes.
gonads.
Yes.
They'll actually eat those and they'll eat the siphons. They'll just pull the siphons off.
Oh, no kidding.
So those are primarily their diet. They'll eat worms. So they're almost exclusively eating things on the bottom.
Okay. Wow. So when they do surface, I mean, it sounds like they can survive in shallow water areas, but do they like deeper water? Do they prefer to be at a certain depth?
So the deepest I think they've been found is only like 100 feet.
Oh,
So
okay.
so the thought is, they prefer to be kind of shallow. We know that
Mm-hmm.
they're temperature sensitive. They don't like water temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
So that limits their range north, right?
Right.
But you do find pockets of brown stingrays, for example, in Morro Bay. So,
Oh, okay.
and the water gets a little cool,
Yeah.
off the Central California coast. But
Yeah.
those places, the thought is that they migrated up there during a strong El Nino. And then usually where they end up living are near a lagoon where the water gets warm or where there's a power plant.
Oh, okay. So like manatees, they like the warm power plant water.
Exactly.
Okay.
Bunny, did you
Wow.
remember ever seeing the stingray that used to hang out in the marina where we kept our sailboat in Alameda?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we
There was
did
a
have some
giant,
stingrays
large
up there.
stingray up there that liked to swim around in the marina. Maybe because there was food. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
So they're
here's an
okay.
interesting thing. It said that the freshwater stingray has greater toxicity than the marine stingrays. I don't know
Yes.
if that's true. I'm
Yeah.
reading it.
Yeah. So the venom probably packs a little bit more punch, and that's probably because there's a greater variety of predators for them.
So is it true that the stingray won't go after you unless you try to mess with it? Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
So they basically use that strictly for defense.
Hmm.
Well, don't make them feel threatened.
But where were we on the beach where they say you have to shuffle your feet? What beach was that? Was that
Everywhere down here, every
oh,
beach.
yeah. So
Yep.
are they breeding there? Is that juveniles or
Yeah.
are
So
those like
breeding season starts in March, and that's when
Oh,
males and females come together, usually in
okay.
bays or estuaries, but they'll do it along beaches as well. And then females, after they have become impregnated because they have internal fertilization,
Oh, okay.
females will move into the lagoons and they will stay in the lagoons all summer long seeking out warm water. And we
Hmm.
think that speeds up their gestation.
Oh,
So
okay.
they have one of the shortest gestation periods of any elasmobranch. So they can produce a litter of pups in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many pups will they have in a litter?
Anywhere from about 2 to 8.
Oh, wow. Okay. And are they like live birth or are they eggs?
Nope, they're born live.
Oh,
They're
no
about the
kidding.
size of a coaster
Okay.
when
So
they're
they go from
born.
cookie sized to pancake sized.
Yeah.
so in Monterey? I think they had some rays that if you were lucky enough you can touch. Uh, which ones are those that they would put out there for the public to interact with?
Those are the same rays,
Uh
but
huh.
they've clipped off their spines.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So remember, the spine is like a fingernail. It,
Right.
Uh-huh.
it has no nerves. So you
Okay.
can take a pair of literally toenail clippers and you can clip that off. So
Gotcha.
now it no longer has the venomous spine, and you
Got
can
it.
touch them with two fingers and pet them, and But if you try grabbing them, they will flick their tail at you.
Okay.
That's
They will
fair.
definitely do that, even though they don't have their weapon anymore.
Well,
Right.
I'm looking at a sample of a spotted eagle ray, and it looks like they've been painted. It's just a beautiful. I wish I could share this with you.
Yeah,
They're
no.
absolutely beautiful decoration on their skin. Or
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just down in Costa Rica doing some work,
Oh,
and there were
cool.
lots of spotted eagles raised there, and they're just absolutely gorgeous.
That is so cool.
wow.
So, which ones are the one? Do all rays? Is it manta rays the ones that will like launch themselves out of the water? And then what is the do all? I'm assuming not every ray species does that. Is that just manta rays, or is that like did they all launch at some point? But where did that behavior come from?
Yeah, so keep in mind, think of there as being several groups of rays, right?
Okay,
So like the
yes,
brown
we'll break it down.
stingrays, they are laying on the bottom
Right.
most
Okay,
of the time. They'll swim along the bottom, maybe a little bit on the water column, but by and large, they make their living off the bottom.
gotcha.
Then we have another whole group of rays that live in the water column, right? So those are the mobulid rays. Those include the manta and the mobulids. So you've probably seen pictures or video of it's like mobula popcorn, where these things are
Hmm.
jumping and jumping and jumping in the water. You shoot
Yes.
schools of them.
Yes.
So they're pelagic. They're planktivores. They're filter feeders. So they're eating plankton in the
Oh,
water.
okay.
Whereas, our bat rays and round rays, they're snurfling things out of the sediment and getting crabs and clams and worms. And those pelagic ones are swimming through the water with their mouths open and just
Right.
taking in all the plankton they can get.
Right.
So the
So
question is, why do they jump?
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were saying the question. I was going to ask you
No,
about the
you're not
health.
letting. He's not letting him finish. We're
Oh, go
still
ahead.
on the
Oh, I'm
jumping
sorry.
thing.
Sorry.
Quiet, you.
Sorry.
Well, here, I'll ask you this question. Why do they jump?
I have no idea. Get back, shake things off their skin. I don't know. Get
Okay,
more
that,
food.
that sounds good. I'll buy that. You got anything else?
Maybe it surprise stuns their food. I have no idea. I mean, isn't that how the thrasher shark works? It just smacks them and kind of
With,
stuns their
exactly. They'll
fish.
smack them with their tail. But rays jump, white sharks jump, makos
That's
jump, threshers
that's true.
jump. All these
Oh,
sharks that live in the water column jump. So
okay.
why did they jump? So that's a question that scientists have been trying to answer. And believe it or not, I think your explanation may be a good one. That they have the itchies, and that's a good way of dislodging things that ectoparasites that may scratch or cause
Right.
itch. It's a good way to dislodge them. The other possibility is trying to avoid predators. One theory is that males might be showing off for females.
Yeah,
Okay. So like the
that's what I was
So
whales
going
the
to
higher
say.
do.
you can jump may mean you're a good mate.
Okay.
And then another possibility, which I personally love but have no data to back up, is that it's fun.
That's fair too.
Yeah.
I like that one too. I like that one too. So
Jump
are
because
males big? Mhm. It could be, yeah. Are males bigger than females, or is there dimorphism in the ray world, or is it species dependent?
it's less so than sharks. So
Okay.
there is a little bit of sexual dimorphism in rays, but it's not as pronounced as it is in sharks.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So you really have to go searching. So then, for the local stingrays here, have you ever been stung?
Oh, many times.
Oh gosh. How
Ouch.
badly does that hurt? I mean, how long does the sting last?
Well, so it depends. So we've been doing stingray research for over 20 years. So
Hmm.
everybody in my team gets stung at some point, and it's
Right.
like a badge of honor now.
Right.
Eek.
And it depends if you're wearing booties and you're in the water, you have this neoprene, and the spine goes through the neoprene, which goes through like butter. At least you're
Oh.
rubbing off most of the mucus, so you
Right.
get a wound, but it doesn't hurt as bad.
Right.
We're catching them in nets, and we're taking them out of the nets, and quite often I've been stung on the hands.
Eee.
So
Ouch.
then you get everything from a full ramp, you get the full whammo to okay, I just got a graze or things like that. It's the hot water. Hot water, you stick your hand in hot water for an hour or so, the pain immediately goes away.
No
And
kidding.
then after that, you just got to make sure it doesn't get infected.
Right.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay. So I guess if animal stings, that's probably the least severe of them. Now, when a ray stings, will it lose its spine, or will it sting and then I'm assuming swim away, or how does that work once it stings? Can it
Yeah,
sting
so
again?
a lot depends on how far the spine went in. In some
Ah,
cases, the spine does get pulled out. And
oh,
we did some research many years ago that shows if you physically remove the spine, they'll immediately start to regenerate a new one, which is
oh
so cool.
Oh,
wow,
wow.
But normally that's an annual process. Starting in
right,
May, we start producing a new one. By August, the old one falls out. But if the old one just fell out and has a new one, and we yanked it out in August,
right.
by the end of September, it'd have a new spine.
Oh wow,
So there's some cool physiology going on there.
yeah. It's because like,
But
oh, I
most
need.
most of the time, they don't lose the spine. They just add new mucus to replace the old mucus, and they can do that fairly quickly.
Okay, time for my question.
Fine.
So it seems like ray locomotion is a big issue. I'm looking at something here that I stumbled on. It says hydrodynamics of swimming in stingrays, numerical simulations, and the role of leading edge vortex. So, is their locomotion efficient? Because it was being studied by the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at the University of Buffalo, which it freaks me out. But okay, everything goes. They look to nature for every thing,
Mhm.
which we've talked about previously. So, tell us a little bit about their locomotion.
So it actually is very efficient, and there are different types of ray swimming, right? So there are like manta rays and bat rays,
Right. That.
which flap their wings like a bird, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And that is actually a fairly efficient way to move through the water. And then you have round stingrays that have an undulatory wave that moves
Right.
down their fin.
Hmm.
So remember, things like manta rays that flap their wings like a bird can also bend their back. They do things called
Oh.
barrel rolls, where they
Yes.
will literally just do this barrel roll through the plankton.
Yes.
Right.
So they
Yes.
just keep their mouth open and roll through this cloud of plankton and just fill their gullets, right? They can generate enough force that they can launch themselves out of the water. So even the Navy has been looking at that mode of propulsion because it is incredibly efficient. So it's not good for rapid propulsion, but it is good for sustained propulsion.
Gotcha.
Round stingrays, the key to that undulatory wave is maneuverability. So you
Mm.
can undulate a wave in one direction of your fin, and then in the other direction, you can pivot on a dime, right?
Oh.
So
Oh,
it's like
wow.
Okay.
it's like a hovercraft, right?
Like a shopping
Right.
cart.
All of that is based
Yeah.
on the undulatory wave that goes down the petrol fins, and that makes them very maneuverable.
Yeah.
So they're not great swimmers. Like they can swim distances. We've tagged round stingrays that have swam 35 miles in a month,
Wow.
which is a pretty good distance for an animal that's only about a foot wide, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
But things like manta rays can, migrate thousands of miles.
Right.
Wow.
So a lot depends on how they live, what they do, and how they use that mode of propulsion for their lifestyle.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. How, if they're basically just a giant circle with a tail, it's like how, can they really turn on a dime, or are they having to, it's like a big semi truck. It takes a minute to maneuver themselves, but you're saying that they can. That's really interesting. So then how long do they live on average?
That depends on the species. Mantas probably can live to be a lot older.
Okay.
I don't know the exact um, age limits for some of those species. Round stingrays, we've done the aging studies on those. We estimate that the maximum longevity is about 15 years.
Oh, that's longer than I was expecting. Wow. Okay. No kidding. So the
So,
manta
are
ray.
there any up in northern climates like Oregon, up further north, Alaska? Are there stingrays in Alaska?
There are some. Most of those are deep water, which means if they're deep water, they can be found pretty much anywhere because they're thermally limited. So
Hmm.
for example, off Hawaii, there are some deep water stingrays, and you can find those same deep water stingrays in more northern climates in shallower water. But usually, the stingrays get replaced by skates as you get further north.
Ah,
Okay.
okay.
So they're non-stinging, flattened cousins replace them
Okay.
usually.
Gotcha. So for the stingrays as well as the manta rays, well, it's interesting you brought that up. Not to self not to brag, but in Hawaii, my mom and I, we went night swimming with manta rays, and they, shine lights and it gets all the phytoplankton active. And they did those amazing barrel rolls. And these guys were probably like 5 feet across. I mean,
Yeah.
just huge. And like one of the wings touched me, and I was like, "Oh my god, it touched me! That's so cool!" But yeah, they're quite for animals that are that big and in the water. They're quite majestic and elegant looking. And again, they can do that barrel roll, and it looks like effortless to them. And then, are they social creatures? Because I know they do that that mass migration as that huge group. Is that socialization and like group living a part of them? Do stingray, our local stingrays, do they like to live in groups? Are they solitary rays?
So there are some that are highly social. So some of the
Okay.
mobulids form huge schools,
Okay.
and they're very social. And then things like manta are a little less. They still
Okay.
will form groups. Obviously, they form groups and mate. They may feed together. They have very large brains. So as rays go, they have one of the largest brains, which is really
Oh,
cool.
no kidding. So
It
what are they
says
doing
that
with
this.
that brain?
Oh, go ahead.
And a lot of sensory equipment in there. So
Okay.
probably well over half that brain is dedicated to just interpreting sensory information.
No kidding. Okay. Wow. All right, now your turn.
It says I'm looking at something. I'm not even sure where I'm at, but it says skatefish can live up to 50 years versus
Yes,
stingray 15 to 25. Wow.
right. Yeah,
Is that
skates can live a lot longer, and that's common in animals that live in cold water.
Oh yeah, that
okay?
makes sense. Like the Greenland shark, they're like, this one's
Uh,
probably 200 years old, and it's like it looks like it's 200 years old.
Yep, yep.
Wow,
can
that
you
is
tell
so.
me the difference between viviparous versus oviparous? Maybe I'm not pronouncing that
I
right.
think he did this
Yeah,
last time, but go ahead, Dr. Lowe.
yeah. So viviparous versus oviparous, right? So
Yes.
oviparous are egg laying. So skates lay an egg case, right?
Yeah.
The Little Mermaid's purse that the skate develops in, and the mom drops that on the bottom, and she takes off, and then anywhere from a couple months to a couple of years later, uh, an embryonic skate will emerge and hatch. So that's an example of ovipary. And then there's ovovivipary, where the mom lays an egg inside, the egg hatches internally, and then she gives birth to a live young.
Oh.
Oh,
So
And
in
okay.
then
those little
vivipary is
pouches,
simply, oh, say again?
what are they? How are they subsisting? What are they eating or living on or breathing or
Oh, see, that's the cool thing about shark reproduction. There's so many different strategies. So most of them start off with a big yolk, huge yolk, like a
Uh
chicken.
huh.
But
Okay.
the embryo is used up all the yolk long before it's born. So then in some cases, the moms will continue to ovulate eggs, and then those embryos will eat those eggs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh
And then in
wow.
other cases, the female's uterine wall will become very fuzzy, and she will secrete a glycoprotein that the embryos will drink, like a protein shake.
No kidding.
So
Holy
there are
mackerel.
all these different strategies. And some sharks, they'll eat their siblings.
Right.
So there's lots of different examples. But in the skates and rays, the skates, which are oviparous, they only have the yolk to rely on. And then in stingrays that give live birth, they use the uterine milk. So that's where the uterus gets all fuzzy, and then the female secretes that glycoprotein that the embryos drink once the yolk is gone.
That's amazing.
Oh, wow. That
Nature's
is.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
Wow.
So I had another question too about rays and well, kind of all the rays, I guess. So, manta rays versus stingrays. Why do some rays have stingers? And then, what is a manta ray or a bat ray or an eagle ray gonna do to defend itself since it has that little skinny rat tail almost? What are they gonna do?
Well, that's usually size, right? You're really big.
Okay. Right,
So if you're
okay.
that
Fair.
big, you can usually take care of yourself. A good fin
Fair
slap
enough.
is enough to dissuade somebody. Um,
That's true too. Okay, yeah,
and
that's
again,
fair.
a little spine isn't going to help you if an orca decides it wants to eat you.
Yeah, they'll just eat you. So have you
Yes.
ever come across a shark that you can tell has been or even a ray that's been chomped on by another creature that's kind of maybe half alive, half dead?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So you can tell there's some hardcore skates and rays out there that will have little chunks missing from them.
Oh, wow. And they'll just still
Fin,
be kind
half
of
a
going
fin
to
missing, sure. And they keep going. Well,
Wow. Now, does that affect their swimming at all? Are they kind of lopsided with half a fin gone?
they're still out there kicking, so they're doing something right.
Wow, that's really impressive.
So the stingrays that are in the local area by you in Southern California, they're not going to kill you. But what about the one that killed what's his name, the
Steamer one.
Australian guy?
Yeah. So those whiptail rays in Australia are get quite large, right? So they're about 6 feet across.
Ooh.
They can weigh up to a couple hundred pounds, and their stingray spine is the size of a steak knife.
Oh shoot!
No, thank you.
So
Yeah.
he got that right in his heart.
Oh
Yeah,
my
that'll do it.
goodness!
Yeah, that will
So he was
definitely do
stabbed
it.
in his heart. That's
He
what
was
got
literally
him.
stabbed in the heart. Yes.
Yeah, that'll
Okay,
do
that
it.
now I understand. Wow.
That will definitely kill
Did
you.
did he was he messing with that or we don't know?
So we don't know. There are
Yeah.
a bunch of different variations of the story, but remember I told you rays don't attack people for no
Yeah.
reason?
Yeah.
Right.
It may have. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh,
Yeah.
he might have been trying to do something for camera purposes and it got a little taken away.
That's crazy that it
Carried
just
too
it
far.
got him right in the heart. So then, speaking of rays, that new thing that came out that they make a noise.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've seen that. What is that? Because it sounds like just these little clicks. How are they making it? Do we know what it's for? What?
So they do have teeth, right? And they have tooth plates. So they have
Okay,
the ability to grind those, obviously, to make noises. The question is
sure.
why?
Yeah,
Yeah, what mode of vocalization is that, and how is it used, and what does it mean? So the fact that people are able to measure it's really cool. But the next challenge for scientists will be what does it mean,
right.
and what function does it serve? So that it was kind of cool to see that. It'll be cool to see how many other species actually do it.
Right.
But then why? Why do they do it?
Right. So is this a relatively new phenomena, the clicking noise, or realizing that rays make an audible noise that humans can hear?
Yeah, and I think probably what happened was there were people out there who were listening for environmental noise, right?
Right.
So what are the reef noises that you hear? And you get all this stuff, and you don't know where it comes from or what made it. So then people can go around just like people that do audio go around and record the sounds of various things, and you have a spectrogram, right? So you have basically what that power function is of the amplitude and the frequency of the sound that's produced. And now with new software, you can say, okay, here's the sound that this thing produces. Here's my environmental noise. I want to search through that record for that signal. And now the software will go through and say, oh, it matches this. So now you have that in the environment. So that's how people are using sound to figure out what's living in a place. And if we know how far that sound can travel, we can begin to even estimate how many things may be in that place just
Oh,
by
wow.
listening.
Wow. No kidding. So would you tag rays? Can you tag stingrays or
Oh
various types
yeah,
of rays?
yeah. We've tagged round stingrays. We're tagging bat rays. They travel long. Bat rays travel all over. They travel all over Southern California.
So what's the purpose of their mass migration, or like the manta ray mass migration that you see? Did we just not sure? They're just like, we're going this way now.
Yeah, we're not sure. We're not sure why.
Okay.
Likely due to feeding and reproduction.
Sure.
So they
Sure.
probably feed in one place and reproduce in another. And like
Gotcha.
many sharks and rays, males and females do not hang out together. So
Okay.
they
Yeah.
usually there's sexual segregation during non-breeding season, where the males go
Ah.
one someplace and females go somewhere else. So
Okay.
usually the only time we see them together is during breeding season or when they're immature and they don't care whether one's a male
Right.
or
Okay.
I need to ask you a shark question, which is, when we go whale watching, they talk about whales having identification, like a fingerprint, like on their tail. Is that hold true for sharks as well, or some shark species?
yes, yeah. So we know that for some shark species have unique markings that they carry throughout their lives. The
Oh,
tricky
okay.
part of that is they also get into scuffles and get bitten up, especially the females during breeding season. And the scars can mask some of those.
Ah,
But with the new machine learning image processing software we have, it's amazing what you can do, right? just like facial recognition software. So even people that have had plastic surgery can still be recognized based on certain parameters.
Sure.
So scientists are now using a lot of that image processing technology to track individuals.
We want to thank you very much for your time. We don't
No,
want to
really quick question. How do they find
overstay.
their food? Are they touching, smelling, or chemoreceptors? There's a little bit of everything.
All the above. So the
Okay.
rays are using olfaction, they're using sense of smell. And what's really cool about the rays is they have something called naked nematocysts. So they have these little, basically these little hair sensors on a cup that hang underneath the body. And when they go over the sand, they can feel water currents coming through the sand. So imagine you have a clam siphon that's sucking
Right.
water in, a worm that's sucking water in and spitting water out.
Hmm.
They can feel that. And those
Oh,
sensors
wow.
surround the mouth. So then they know, okay, I'm near a hole because their eyes are on top. They can't
Right.
see what they're, it's like having a straw that you can't see. So then once they know they're in the right spot, then they can suck those things out of the sand.
So, what is the purpose of their eyes being on top of their bodies, essentially? I'm imagining that's some sort of evolutionary advantageous feature.
Yeah. So if you're laying on the bottom, that's the best place to have your eyes is
Oh,
on
that
the
makes
top. So you
sense.
can see things coming. Your belly's covered for the most part, right?
Right.
And then the pelagic rays, like the mantas, they have their eyes on the side.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's always something I've wondered about. Is like their eyes are just perfectly kind of like in the middle of of their body, and it's like that's an interesting spot for
And they have
eyes.
180-degree vision. So they can see
Nice.
all the
Oh.
way behind them. Yeah.
Okay. That helps them share with keeping predators and whatnot away and seeing what's going on in your world. So, what's your most favorite ray encounter or ray story, really quick, before we wrap up here?
So my favorite ray is kind of a half ray, half shark. And
Wow. What is that?
that's the electric ray.
Oh, the
So the
electric
electric
ray.
ray is has a flat disc and it's dorsal-ventrally flattened like a ray. Its mouth is in the bottom, its gills are in the bottom, its eyes and spiracles on the top. But it has a tail like a shark and it swims like a shark.
Hmm.
And what
I
makes it
got to look
electric
this up.
is it has modified branchial muscles that act like batteries. And they can discharge all those cells simultaneously and create a strong electric discharge. So strong that they can break their prey's back.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Wow.
So for my master's thesis, I studied the Pacific electric ray, which are common off the coast of California. And we were the first to measure their electric discharge because we built an underwater housing for a storage oscilloscope, found them when they were buried in the seafloor, and then would make them mad so they would discharge and we could record it.
So, what are how many watts are they producing?
It's
They
volts.
produce
Or
50
volts, excuse me.
volts at the surface. So that turns out that that's enough to put a human heart into fibrillation.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay. Don't want to touch that. That's
How many volts did
insane.
you measure? Because this says 8 to 220.
So that's in air. So if you ground it to air, you'll get 200. In water, in their natural environment where they use it, 50 volts. But 50 volts is producing a
That's
lot
enough.
of amps.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and remember, that's seawater. So,
It's
Oh,
more
the 50,
conduction.
yes.
yikes. Yeah. Have you ever felt that? I
Oh,
hopefully there
yeah.
weren't any. Eek.
You can't, it's like sticking your finger in a light socket. You can't keep your hand there.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
You have to pull
Wow.
it back because the muscles contract.
Right.
So it's just like sticking your finger in a light socket. It's
So
amazing.
are they using the electricity for hunting or protection of their
Oh,
own?
they use it
Okay.
for both. Yeah.
I feel
Wow.
I imagine sharks probably don't really eat those things. They probably make that mistake once and not again.
Yeah. Yeah. Sea lion pups like to play with them once. Just like,
I'm looking at a picture of one and it has five blue spots on its head. I guess it's trying to have its enemies think that it's some weird thing.
yeah.
But,
So that's one of the lesser electric rays, the
oh, it
Narcan ray.
is?
Yeah. They're not as strong as the torpedo rays.
Okay.
It's a
or
very
feeder.
interesting looking. Where do they hang out? Where's their area?
So the cool thing is Pacific electric rays range throughout Southern California to Northern California and
Okay.
Baja. They lay on the bottom during the day, and at night they're up in the water column. And they remind me of Starship Enterprise because they're almost neutrally buoyant. They can hover. And
Yeah.
then what they'll do is they'll
Oh,
swim into a school of anchovies and then just discharge
no
Oh.
and then
kidding.
slurp up the ones that are stunned.
Ah.
So in the early days, we did a National Geographic special where you can take, remember the old photographic flash bulbs?
Yes.
Yes.
And you could take a picture and it would flash.
Yeah.
We could put one of those on the end of a fiberglass rod. And if you got the rate of discharge, it would cause the flash bulb to flash.
Oh
No
wow.
kidding.
It was so
Wow.
cool.
Wow, that is
Well,
so neat.
that may be another episode. Electric rays.
The first
Yeah.
They do
byline
have
for
some.
gravity.
They do have some like dorsal. Is it a dorsal fin along their tail? Is that what you call that? Yeah, I'm looking at one, and
Yeah,
wow.
so am
All
I.
right.
They're pretty crazy looking. Wow, that
Yes.
is who would have thought about electric, electric eel, but not the
Mhm.
electric ray. So is that a lesser known ray species than the electric ones?
Probably.
Huh.
But they're amazing animals. They really are. I mean, when you and by the way, most of the work that's done studying acetylcholine receptors, which are these neuroreceptors in
Oh yeah,
humans,
ACH.
are done using electric rays because they have the highest concentration of acetylcholine receptors of any known animal.
No kidding. What
Because when
is
they
that for?
discharge, in order to create that voltage, they have to
Right.
get all their cells to depolarize
Oh,
simultaneously.
right. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Is their blood iron based like ours, or is it copper based?
Yep, it's iron based.
Okay. Okay. So it's not like
All
the
right.
what is it, the horseshoe fish, the horseshoe crab that has blue blood. That is so cool. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lowe, for your time. It's always a pleasure
Sure.
to have you on the show.
Yes, absolutely.
And
It's
again, if you
always very interesting. I hope that you don't mind some of our pedestrian questions, but I try to
No,
have a higher thought questions as well, so we can all learn and
sure,
be
sure.
motivated to learn more. Even.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
yes,
having me. I always
All right.
appreciate it.
All right. Well,
absolutely. And
thanks
if you
again.
can donate to the Shark Lab or check the Shark Lab
Yeah,
out,
go down
as
there and check
always,
it out. The next time they have an open house, it's worth the trip.
absolutely. Thank you again, Dr. Lowe, and we will
All right.
see you guys next week.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank
Bye bye
you.
now.